The core question of this series that I've been asking non-believers is, what are Christians? And we've definitely heard some strong opinions so far. Now, I think the next question we should be asking, though, needs to be directed at ourselves. How do they know that we're Christians in the first place? What are we doing to let the world around us know that we're Christians? Is it the way we talk, the way we dress, the bumper stickers we have, or is it something else? Let's hop online and see what Christians have to say this time.
I try to treat everyone with the same respect and care that I would want were I in their shoes.
As an imperfect Christian, I try to live as he asked. I don't judge others. I try to be sympathetic and empathetic.
Have a positive attitude and total faith in the Lord regardless of how dark my situation is. People are watching. Show them how to suffer well. They see the joy, faith, and endurance I have, and they want what I have.
Those are some really good answers. It seems like a common theme there is having the right attitude of genuinely loving and caring about people. And that's great because that's what the Bible says we should be doing.
But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you.
A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another.
So that's the goal. But how are we really doing? I was introduced to a local podcast host named Shawn, and he had some interesting insights. He's not a Christian, but I'll let him explain where he's coming from.
I don't like to call myself an atheist because I hate people that call themselves atheists. There's nothing worse than someone who takes pride in not believing in something, so they try to bring others down for believing in it. Similar to the mom that just lost a daughter. And so she posts about it on Facebook. You know, the mom is like looking for some sort of way to deal with it. And a great way to deal with the loss of your daughter is to know that they went to a better place and they're happy. And even though I don't believe that, me posting on that woman's wall saying, well, there's no such thing as heaven, like what an thing to do. But there are atheists that take pride in that. When someone says, bless you, because they sneezed, and they say, oh, I don't believe in. Like you're not being an atheist, you're being an.
Isn't that interesting? How often do we fall into the same kind of trap of arrogance, of not reading the room when trying to comfort someone or just sharing our faith in general? Definitely some food for thought there. So, what have Shawn's experiences been like when he's dealt with Christians?
This is probably not the worst, but it's the one that came to mind. My high school football coach. Just picture your all-American football coach. But he was in church, twice a week. He was not just a church goer, but he was involved in the church somehow. All of our pre-game stuff, all of our motivation came from religious inspiration. But he was like the meanest dude that you'd ever met. The better experiences that I've had with a Christian or Christians are people that I've known for a longer period of time that have consistently been above and beyond what you would expect from a person in general. Part of me equates that to their religion, but I also know that there are plenty of people that are religious, of any sort of religion, that do not convey to the world what they tend to believe is how they should be. I have two really good friends that are, I would put them maybe on, if I had to put like a level to them, they would be like the same level of Christian as far as like their goodness, right? Neither one of them befriended me out of a desire to make me Christian. I would have friends in high school that would want to hang out with me only to save me. So these two specific friends have never done that. And they actually almost never bring it up. If your question hadn't have been, what's your best interaction with Christians, they still would have been one of my top examples of just people. But it's hard for me to say that these two great friends of mine are great friends because they're Christian. But they definitely live by the core Christian values that they believe in. And those core Christian values, like the actual center core, are great values. I think that anyone that follows those general ideas, as long as they actually follow them, will be great people. But you can have those ideals without being a Christian.
Here we can see the difference it makes when we're consistently living by the Word of God. Of course, we're not going to do it perfectly. But if people can see that we are genuinely making the effort from our hearts and not just putting on appearances, they can better appreciate where we're coming from and, hopefully, not be pushed further away from God. Now, in my conversation with Shawn, it came up that his girlfriend Joni actually came from a Christian background, specifically Mennonite. Now, depending on where you're from, that name may conjure up different mental pictures. The label covers a pretty broad spectrum of beliefs and fashions, but the point is that you can usually identify by sight whether someone is Mennonite or Amish. That's one of the ways they've chosen to set themselves apart as Christians. So, knowing the range that label can cover, I was curious to hear Joni's story.
Well, I was raised in a Mennonite community. Overall, they would be Christians, or they say that they're Christians, that their base belief is Christian. They believe in Jesus and being saved. The one I grew up in, I feel like, is a cult more than most of them are. Most of them are way more open and more about Christianity, whereas the one I grew up in, we had the Bible, and then we had another book. There was a guy, it's been like 200 years ago now, maybe 100 and some years ago, that went into a trance and preached, and they wrote all of it down, and they decided that he was a prophet from God. And the church that I come from was a branch of all of those that started from him. So there were things in there that do not match up with the Bible. Very specific things about your dress and things like that. Whereas I feel like other Mennonite churches are, like I said, a little bit more flexible. I didn't grow up with photos at all. Were considered evil, and I think they always said you're not supposed to have a likeness of yourself or of anything. So we couldn't have little toy animals, no dolls, no little horses, nothing that was a likeness of something real. They believed that they're the right church. So leaving that church, you were going to be damned. They even look at other Mennonite churches oh, they're trying, but they're not going to make it. Growing up like that, I always just blindly believed it and didn't question it, didn't question that God was real. But about 3.5 years ago, I decided to leave the religion and my marriage at the same time. I had been in an abusive relationship for years. Verbally very abusive, spiritually abusive, physically abusive, and it was something Mennonites, they don't talk about. They say that they're Christians and they're all about love and Jesus, but all of my friends that I grew up with were sexually molested, and there was like horrible things that happened behind the scenes that I didn't really know as a kid, but as I got older, you know, kind of heard about it, and they would just put up with it, or they would tell, it was usually guys, that they need to like confess, you know, in front of everybody and say that they're sorry and it's okay, but authorities never got involved. They do not believe that divorce is okay under any circumstances. In fact, my dad told me that he's known of women who have gotten beaten by their husbands and they still stayed with their husbands. And why couldn't I be like that? We were married for 10 years, so it was a long time, and I had thought that I could stay for my kids, but it got to the point where I wasn't doing my kids any favors. I didn't think that it was good for them.
And this really bothers me, so I'll throw this in there. When she went to court for the divorce hearing, the father and the mother speak on how they would like custody to go. And they bring in, if they want, like witnesses to say, you know, I'm a good mom, I'm a good dad. The kids would be great with me. Let's agree on this custody split. Her parents sided with her ex-husband. And I tried to explain to her that had she grown up just in a normal Christian upbringing, even in that situation, her parents would have never sided with the husband.
I lost so many friends, countless friends, and friends who in the beginning kind of stuck around and were like, oh, they're going to be there for me no matter what. But because I filed for divorce and went through with it, obviously Mennonites put a lot of stock in the way that you dress. I grew up wearing the white hat, the homemade long dresses with long sleeves, and me not dressing that way anymore, you know, wearing jeans, and obviously I cut all my hair off. And it's blue. All of that put together, I think people looked at me and were just like, whoa, like you've changed so drastically. So I've seen a lot of that where maybe my dad heard that I did something, even if it wasn't true, and he would then tell me that I can't support you in this, like I can't help out in any way, because when I left financial security as well. I don't know if you know this, but Mennonites don't really believe in education. So 8th grade is all they get, especially for women, because women are just supposed to get married and have babies. And so I have virtually no education. And I had never worked. I had been a stay-at-home mom. And when I walked out of that, it took me a while because of that. I knew that there wasn't going to be anybody that would help me. I had hoped that my parents would help me, but they didn't. But I started working, and I had 3 jobs for a while and still starved to death. There was one time where I had the kids and I didn't really have food to feed them, and I did ask if I could bring the kids over for like a meal. And Mom was like, yeah, that's okay. So I don't want to sit here and say that they've done all these bad things, because they haven't all the time.
We had a short moment where I was allowed to accompany her to their house we went over there for Christmas. I mean, as you can imagine, introducing me to your Mennonite family they don't want her to they want her to get back with her initial husband. So any boyfriend is a problem, but especially me, right? But we were like slowly kind of bonding, and the ex-husband contacted her parents and like Jesus shamed them for interacting with me, who's sleeping with their daughter, but we're not married. They must have felt so much guilt that they then said, well, you guys can't come over anymore. And it's like, man, like, they were okay with it until someone spitefully, because he's the angry ex-husband, called them out on it. And then they were like, oh, like, well, we don't want to look, like we're okay with it. So I guess if that's how it's being interpreted, we have to like shut it down.
Overall, most of the time I feel like they hate me. They don't like me. They put up with me, but they're embarrassed of me. And they're embarrassed of the way that I'm living my life and how I've changed so much outwardly. But they don't really take the time to talk to me to know how I'm actually doing or who I actually am now. A part of me is like, I just want them to acknowledge that I have somehow managed to start my own business, and support my kids, and like I'm still here. I've made it somehow. It's been hard, but it's getting better. Me walking away from that, I didn't think that I was walking away from God or from believing in Jesus, but the way that I was treated propelled me away from it. I have known people just recently, like the past 3 years, that I know are Christians who have been supportive, who, no matter what I've told them about what I've been through, have always been there for me, been encouraging to me. There's a specific lady in town here that I'm talking about who I know that I can always count on. So that's the best I got.
Wow. There is a lot to unpack there. Now, it's easy to just dismiss stories like Joni's as extreme outliers. I mean, we're talking about an abusive cult situation, right? But those ideas usually start as a desire to be different from the world, which is a biblical concept, be in the world but not of the world, right? But when we take those ideas too far and remove true Christ-like love from the equation, it creates a recipe for tragedy. Think about all the abuse scandals in the church, whether it's ultra-conservative figures, mega church leaders, or Christian celebrities. It seems like we can barely go a few months without hearing about victims coming forward accusing someone of sexual misconduct, tyrannical leadership, or financial fraud. And it's not just the big celebrities in the Christian world that this happens to. It happens in the small local congregations as well. So I think what we need to take away from Shawn and Joni's stories is that in our desire to create biblical community and to be authentically different from the rest of the world, we need to make sure we're still creating environments that foster true Christ-like love for others. Because if we don't, we risk becoming someone's reason to reject the gospel or leave the faith.
While he did things like that, he also proceeded to break my family apart. He was cheating on numerous women over the course of several years on my mom. I do not know how many women he was with. I just know I can't count them on all my limbs.
If you'd like to show this series to your small group Bible study, check out our resources at whatarechristtians.com. And be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our future videos.